I mentioned yesterday the Canadian feeling about wanting to beat the U.S. at all costs. We can afford to lose to any country, but not the Americans. Not at hockey. Yesterday I watched 4x100 women's swimming relay because there's nothing on TV and it's the Olympics, so I'll give it a shot. When am I going to watch swimming? Only at the Olympics. Two things I noticed when I watched last night during the women's, I don't know, 1600 or what it was, the freestyle, when the Hungarian swimmer beat the world record by 2.5 seconds. Uh, if she doesn't test positive for everything, I'd be very surprised. But I will say this. I think that after what happened with the Russian team and basically the Olympics committee going, we'll look the other way. I think there's so much doping going on at this point with Olympic athletes. I kind of think it's expected now. So Ben Johnson got vilified 25 years ago for something that I honestly think is pretty standard now. I don't think it's considered as horrible as it was. I think it's horrible now when you get caught. I think now when you get caught, I think there's probably athletes won't say it publicly, but behind closed doors, be like, how did you get caught? What the hell? What were you using? Well, I used that too. I've never got caught. Well, when did you use the masking agents? Oh, there's your problem. But I'm telling you, when you beat the world record by 2.5 seconds, and you're way ahead of the field, and the second place also would have beat the world record, and she's way behind you. To me, that's a red flag. Personally, to me, that's a red flag. Maybe I'm crazy, but the one thing I noticed last night, and this pertains to the U.S.-Canada thing. One sec. I didn't drink all day today at work, so if I'm drinking more often than normal in a video, and I may be, between the Sweden one and this one, I'm really fucking thirsty because I got up 11 hours ago, and this is the first of anything I've had to drink all day. Drink water. Ha! I don't drink water. But when I watched the 4x100 and I heard the Canadians were in it, I was watching on NBC. And the Americans get second place, and of course, the whole time they're just America, U.S., U.S., America, America. And then when the Americans finished second, and they showed a girl in red who's crying, happy crying, and I said, that's a Canadian athlete. So I went to CBC, and sure enough, I was right. That was one of the Canadian swimmers that just got the bronze medal. So the U.S. gets silver, and they have a reaction of, yeah, we got silver, that's pretty good, we should have gold. Canada gets bronze. First medal they've had in the pool in 40 years in that event. And these girls, two of them were 16, in tears. And the one girl was in tears talking to the reporter after. His name escapes me. It shouldn't, but it does. And then she was in tears again during the medal ceremony. And it was in that moment that I'm like, there's the difference between an American Olympic athlete in many cases and the Canadians. Canadians wear their heart on their sleeves. And we're there to participate. But man, it's nice when we win something, especially when it's unexpected. And in the pool, it was okay that the Americans beat us because the Americans are expected to beat us. But man, back in the day, I tell you, when the Ben Johnson Carl Lewis thing was going, oh, and I mean Americans, sure, and Carl Lewis himself came out big time like, oh, Ben Johnson's running dirty, and I can't believe this. This is disgusting. And all I kept thinking was, Carl, shut up. You're dirty too. You just didn't get caught. To this day, I believe Carl Lewis was juicing just as much as Ben Johnson. He just didn't get caught. Now, Donovan Bailey, I believe, was clean. I believe Donovan Bailey was clean. And every American in the world tried to beat him, and they just couldn't. And they just couldn't deal with the fact that Donovan Bailey was faster than them. And it just drove them nuts. That was back when a lot of Jamaican-born athletes were representing Canada. Usain Bolt, I look at him, and what he did, and all I keep thinking is, man, if this was the 80s, Usain Bolt would have been wearing a Canadian shirt. He would have been representing Canada. But now, the odds are even and they're staying home instead of coming up here and representing Canada. So it kind of sucks, but it's okay. But in hockey, they're not allowed to beat us. Women's hockey, you look at the absolute huge rivalry between the Americans and Canadians. They fucking hate each other. The American and Canadian women hate each other. And they can play each other 15 times in a month. And in that 15th game, it's just as intense as it is in the first. The men, it's different. Because for these guys, they're NHL players. They play on the same teams. And it's different. But for the women, man, it's one hell of a... I guess we'll see with women's hockey now having its own professional league. If that becomes a moneymaker and if it becomes something... And I think it should. Because women's hockey isn't bad. It's not as good as men's hockey in terms of talent level, but the intensity's there, and they're good players. And if there was a women's hockey team in Chilliwack, I'd probably go down and watch at least a couple of games and just to take it in, just to support it. So when I crap on the World Cup that's coming up, it's not because I don't like international hockey. I love international hockey. It's just certain items of this that I don't understand. Before I get into the U.S. roster, Phil Kessel, I agree. Phil Kessel should be on this roster. I don't know. I know that there's a perception that Phil Kessel's very unpopular. And I've had that feeling since he was a Bruin. I remember when he came back from cancer treatments. And it weirded me out that the players didn't seem to care too much. And I thought, you'd think the players would rally around him or something, and they don't seem to be upset that he's not in the locker room. And it was just this weird feeling I had. And the whole time he was in Toronto, I always got the feeling like we just missed a fight he had with one of his teammates or with one of the coaches. In Pittsburgh, he seems genuinely happy. He seems to genuinely fit in. His teammates seem to get along with him, and it seems like he's finally got it. So he should be in this tournament, regardless of if somebody in Boston has a problem with him or somebody in Toronto has a problem with him. And I'm not talking about the fans. Everybody relax. I'm not talking about the fans. I'm talking about professionals either behind the bench or on the ice. If anybody has a problem with him, get over it. Because he's talented enough to be in this tournament. And if the Americans are going to keep up with Canada, they got to score. That being said, let's take a look at the American roster, the same as we've looked at the other rosters. And this is the last roster to look at. After this, that's it. In net, the Americans have Ben Bishop, Jonathan Quick, and Corey Schneider. I'm going to say right now, they have the best top 3 goaltenders in the tournament. And I'm going to get shit on for that because people are going to be, Jonathan Quick wasn't very good last year. I will take Jonathan Quick in a tournament over most of the rest of the goalies that are playing. Because Jonathan Quick has proven in the Stanley Cup playoffs, he didn't have very good playoffs this year, I get it. But he's proven in previous seasons he can get extremely hot for short periods of time, and he's basically unstoppable. The scary thing is, with Ben Bishop and Corey Schneider, he could be your number 3. I hope Corey Schneider is the starter, because Canucks fan here, and I'd love to see it. On the blue line, Dennis Bufflin, John Carlson, Eric Johnson, Jack Johnson, Ryan McDonough, Matt Niskanen, and Ryan Suter. There's no way both Jack Johnson and Ryan McDonough make this team as top 6 because of their defensive play. Jack Johnson sits. I cannot see Jack Johnson getting in the lineup until there's an injury. And, if you look back over my videos, it would sound like I have some kind of a thing against Jack Johnson. I don't. But his defensive side of the game is severely lacking, and every stat I've ever seen shows that. Now, McDonough, there's people on my channel who've said over and over again the Rangers don't have a good defense, and they don't. They really don't. And McDonough is part of that issue. I think McDonough pushes Johnson out of the lineup. Suter, Bufflin, Carlson, and Eric Johnson, I think, are your top 4. And then the rest of the guys are fighting it out for that 5th and 6th spot. But to me, it's McDonough and Niskanen are 5 and 6. Now up front, Justin Abdelkader, David Backes, Ryan Callahan, Brandon Dubinsky, Patrick Kane, Ryan Kessler, TJ Oshie, Max Pacioretty, who's very good at taking stanchions in the face. Zach Parise, too soon. Joe, Joe Pavelski, Derek Stepan, James Van Riemsdyk, Blake Wheeler. I will admit, as a Bruins fan, that when Chara rode Pacioretty into the stanchion, I yelled "boom" at the top of my lungs every time they showed the replay. And I am so sorry. I that's that's a Boston Montreal rivalry thing, so I will mention the stanchion anytime Chara, the way I see it is this: Chara did a humanitarian thing. He thought, you know what? Those are dangerous. I want the NHL to cover them. The best way for me to show them that these need to be covered is to sacrifice this young man here, with the goal being covering up the stanchion and making sure it can't happen again. And then he turns to Max and says, I am so, so sorry. Max says, for what? And then stanchion in the face. Okay. All right. All right. All right. That's enough on that one. That's okay. Okay. Volume down, Shannon. Volume down. Volume down. I'm picturing the hit in my head, and yeah. Because everybody wanted Chara suspended, but they couldn't really say why, because it wasn't technically against the rules. It was an assault, but it wasn't on purpose. It was just sort of I'm going to ride him into the boards. Holy shit, the stanchion's there. And, Pacioretty drops like a sack of rocks. Um, like I said, as a Bruins fan, I cheered. I was so happy. Oh, God. Okay. The American offense is good. I'm not going to lie. It's physical. Their two-way play is good, but in terms of the mega stars, you have Patrick Kane, who I will qualify as like one of the greatest stars in the game right now. Pavelski is up there. Parise was. Kessler was. And then you've got a bunch of other guys who could have a good tournament. I think for the Americans to win, it's going to come down to their blue line, and it's going to come down to their goaltending. And honestly, between the Americans and the Swedes, I like the Swedes better. And I definitely think Canada's got a better team than the U.S. as well. But in those one-on-one battles, because Canada and the U.S. has had many one-on-one battles that have been classics, could be the gold medal game. There's a lot of physicality on that American team. This is a team that can beat you into the boards. This is a team that can hurt you. And if they struggle in early going, they could resort to that. That could definitely happen. And it could get ugly from there. Because Canada, while we have a very skilled roster in Canada, we have some guys who can go. That if gloves need to be dropped, they can drop the gloves. They'd rather not, but they can. So, while this should be a very gentlemanly tournament between players who realize that this is a precursor to the regular season and it's better if people don't get hurt, games featuring the U.S. could be very, very chippy. Ryan Callahan's in this lineup. I don't like Ryan Callahan. I don't respect his game. I think he's a dirty player. Ryan Kessler is on the American team. Something about Ryan's. And Kessler is a dirty player. Kessler's dirty in a different way, though. Canada beat the Americans. Sweet. And that's in volleyball. See? Canada beat the U.S. Yeah. And it's volleyball. Like, I ever watch men's volleyball. But Kessler's dirty in the way that he will fake an injury. He'll Ribeiro an injury. He'll collapse to the ice if he has to. He'll throw his head back when the stick, nothing went near his face, and he'll throw his head back like he's having a stroke, and nothing has come anywhere near him. Meanwhile, Callahan is literally trying to take a guy's head off, So, you know, I really was neutral on Callahan. I'd always heard about dirty player. And then in last year's, or well, this year's Stanley Cup playoffs, I saw it. And I was like, wow, I like Tampa, but I don't like Callahan. I don't like his game. And that was when it turned, and I'm like, no, I want Pittsburgh to knock Tampa out. I'd been kind of on the fence until then, and then it was just, no, I want Pittsburgh to take Tampa out. Yes, Pittsburgh has Letang, and Letang is a very dirty player, plays on the edge. He's just as likely to hurt himself as he is to hurt somebody else. But Callahan is, he's a rat. He's a Ken Linsman, but more uh, likely to cause injury. And I hope that doesn't happen in this tournament. But this roster that the Americans have picked definitely can cause a lot of anger. Bufflin on the blue line. Bufflin is, you know, has a tremendous shot. He's a very big guy, but he hits a lot, and he can fight if he needs to. And again, if the Americans have troubles and struggle, gloves are going to get dropped. And it may be a Canadian team responding to a Callahan hit, but the Americans may also view this as an advantage for them against the Russians, the Swedes, potentially the Finns, where they look and they go, we're stronger than these guys, we're bigger than these guys, we're tougher than these guys. We can bully them out of the building. So it'll be interesting to see if that does happen at some point. Again, they wouldn't start the tournament that way, but if they're struggling to score, that's when that chippy play is going to start. Because they're going to want to turn the tides, and if they can intimidate the other teams, they won't intimidate Canada or Team North America either. Team North America is a bunch of young kids who just don't know better. So, you know, I mean, Connor McDavid, you look at the hit that put him out for most of last year, he's going to do that again. He's too fast and he's too reckless. And it's going to happen, but that's part of what makes him such a great player. So you can't get rid of that part of his game. But man, the Americans could ride him to the ice, and it like I said, this could get really chippy. This is the one team I look at and I say, oh boy. It's not as bad as how they had Chris Nyland back in 1987. What the hell? And then I was reading up on Chris Nyland last night, and I was reminded that Mike Milbury, as coach of the All-Star team, wanted Chris Nyland in the game, but he had a broken leg, so he couldn't play. And I remember even as a Bruins fan thinking, wow, the coach of the Bruins is a fucking idiot. He wants Chris Nyland in the All-Star game. It was just, you know, this was 25 years before John Scott was put in as a joke, and Milbury thought of the joke 25 years ago. Milbury was a joke. He's it's just sad. And that's the guy that they put on NBC and say this is the best guy to sell the game south of the border. It's Mike frickin' Milbury. The guy who, you know, beats a fan with his shoe and then later on decides that I'm going to put an enforcer in the All-Star game because I'm the coach and it's my team and it's my enforcer. No, Mike, that's not how this works. All right, so that's my take on the American team. A little bit of a dabble there with Milbury, and just my general feeling regarding the team. And I don't understand how Phil Kessel doesn't make the team and Justin Advocator does. And Kessel's more of a skill guy, and some of these chippy guys, if you got them out and you put in a Phil Kessel, I I don't get it. And if some of those Americans that are on that 23 and under team were in here instead, you could have a really good finesse team in the U.S., and you could have a beautiful game between Canada and the U.S., or U.S. and anybody. But they got veterans, and they've got some chippy guys, and they've got some head flick guys who the stick hasn't. I wonder if Kessler walks around the locker room before the game and practices the head fake, you know, and practices whining to the ref. You know, if he whines to his teammates and goes, do you think that'll sell a penalty?" And his teammates just want to stab him because he's dragging them all down. But anyways, that's it for the World Cup. That's the whole enchilada there between the videos I did yesterday, the video I did today, or videos I did today. That's the whole lineup. The NHL's decided these are the players that they want you to see. So we'll see whether this tournament lives up to the star power in it, or whether they play a little bit safe because they know the regular season's right around the corner. Anyways, thanks for watching.